Hi there, it's Polly here with Mr. Snoots. So, I just want to take you on a little ramble. Transgender history, actually Mr. Snoots can stay with me, transgender history, but the wandering mind of a historian. Alright, so by inclination and training, my particular joy in history has always been 17th and 18th century European history. My personal specialty, the thing that I did, theses and studies on, tended to be from the 1640s, English Civil War time, and all the politics and shift of paradigms there, through to sort of the end of the reign of Louis XIV in the early 18th century. Those are my particular loves. So I spoke to you earlier about the Chevalier d'Eon in the mid and late 18th centuries, a transgender individual, or indeed an intersex person who lived as a transgender woman. But now I'm going to talk to you about someone who lived a century earlier and was absolutely famous. Now let me just say, it is very important that we rediscover and bring out into the light these transgender histories. The right wing claims that transgender people have never been here in history, that we just somehow sprung fully armed from Zeus's forehead somehow a few years ago, and other than that have never been heard from. And that is why they try to destroy and hide these histories, and a lot of them are being backburned. In researching this video, I discovered that many of the historical sites that I have relied on have actually removed a lot of the documents that I knew were there on this. They're gone, burned. Because I'm one of these people who actually reads the books and publications and journals of these people that I'm making these videos about. They're gone. So if you do research and so on, find, copy, save PDFs, save the screenshots, save the history. In any case, so I went on a ramble. The most probably famous and successful general in European history outside of France is Prince Eugene of Savoy. He was an Austrian general, or rather he worked for the Austrian throne, and in German that is Prince Eugen. If you ever saw something like the movie Sink the Bismarck, you will notice that the Bismarck is accompanied by another warship, Prince Eugen, a heavy cruiser, that is named after this person, Eugen of Savoy. Now, Prince Eugen was partnered with another famous general, Britain's most successful and famous general, John Churchill, Duke of Marlborough, the general who never lost a battle. Marlborough headed up an alliance. Now, what had happened at the time, to give you a little brief skip, is Louis XIV was very keen on establishing essentially a dictatorial hegemony over all the countries of Europe, and had gone more and more rigidly right-wing Catholic as the years worn on, and was trying to destroy Protestantism and reinstall a Catholic rule over Europe. As such, he was bitterly engaged in fighting against the Dutch, who were the major continental Protestant power at the time, the Protestant German states, and England, which incorporated Scotland into itself at this time to become Great Britain. But these two generals, John Churchill, Duke of Marlborough, and Prince Eugen, they, between them, led an alliance that in the period of what's called the War of the Spanish Succession, that's sort of 1701 to 1715, stopped the French cold. And, this is kind of the reason that we don't all speak French today. But these two were very interesting guys. Prince Eugen could lightly be described as gay AF. Most pride parades wish they were only 1/10 his gay. He is embraced by the Austrian gay community this day as just one of their absolute loves and joys. His birthday is celebrated as a gay festival. Yes, he was a homosexual man. Now, Eugen was actually born to a French nobleman. Savoy was it was its own country at the time, but his mother was in the French court. His father actually was serving in the Austrian army, but the mother is sort of estranged and had dragged the kids off. Now, she had been a mistress of the king, Louis XIV, renowned for shaking anything that would stand still and let him. And she fell out of favour, gained a lot of enemies at court. If you read some histories, it will tell you that she was implicated in the affair of poisons, which is where it was found that a lot of the French nobility had been engaged in kind of poisoning off unwanted husbands or rich relatives, and using this to gain their wealth. Huge scandal at the time, and led to massive police investigations and arrests and executions and all this sort of stuff. My research shows she was not actually involved in this, but she was able to essentially be cast as having known some of the people that were involved in this, and therefore they were threatening to sort of drag her in. People were bad-mouthing her because different court factions wanted her brought down. So she fled the country. And like so many women at the time, she had nothing really to do with her children, so she just left them there. Right, so young Eugen was the youngest child. He was sort of a thin, weedy, and considered to be ill-favoured in his looks because he wasn't quite as pearly white-skinned as other people should be. And he had gained a reputation for homosexuality at the court. And at this late stage, Louis XIV, who turned ultra-Catholic, had turned against homosexuality, which is strange because the French court previously had almost actively embraced it, which we'll get to in a minute. But as young Eugen came of age, he proudly marched up to the king and said, I want a commission just as a lieutenant into a royal regiment. I want to serve in the army. And he was told, no, you're too weedy and I'm not going to do it. But instead of kowtowing to the king and being submissive, he actually stood there very proudly and sort of said, my mother was wronged and you know it. This speech is all recorded, by the way. It's been written down. He proudly said, my mother was wronged. I believe that you owe my family, and a portion of that would be to just give me a commission as an ordinary lieutenant. And he was refused, in the most sneering and demeaning possible way. And his homosexuality was thrown out as, this thing makes you unfit as a soldier. In an absolute fury, Eugene now developed a bitter hatred of Louis XIV and the French court, who their intrigues had brought his mother down and destroyed his family and left him to live in effective poverty. Then they've taken this further chance to sort of try and drag him down. He went to Austria, where his relatives had served with much honour in the Austrian army, asked for a commission, and was given one. His brother, I think, had just died fighting against the Crim Tartars, who were basically a nomadic group that had invaded in through Hungary. So he took up service and rose to become the top general of Austria. Austria was, of course, one of the major powers of Europe at the time. Catholic, but oddly enough, well, not oddly, it is fighting against the superpower of the age, which was France. It allied itself with the Protestant countries to stop Louis XIV in the Spanish War of the Spanish Succession. But John Churchill was actually the son of a royalist officer during the English Civil War, whose name was Winston Churchill. Recognise the name? This family then went on, yes, it's those Churchills. Winston Churchill of World War II fame was named after that royalist officer. John Churchill was a bit of a libertine in his young days, meaning he too would shag anything that moved. Had some very famous affairs with some of the, worst influences at the court of King Charles II, renowned for its debauchery and also for its attempt to echo the French court of Louis XIV as much as possible. When the Spanish Civil War began, Churchill was in position to become the head of that whole alliance. But he struck up a friendship with Prince Eugen, and both of them write, and these letters are preserved and I've read them, about just how much they adored each other. When they met, they just kicked it off as the bestest friends. Best friends forever. They just loved each other. They hung out with each other socially, they shared jokes, they played games, they seemed to just completely hit it off as soulmates. And this friendship allowed these two to cooperate to levels not seen in alliances normally. There's perfect coordination between the two of them. And so it was one of the major things that led to so many victories and stopping the French in the war. Now, I was interested at why is this friendship so deep? You know, is there anything essentially homosexual in or bisexual in John Churchill's background? So I took a look and I couldn't find anything at all. I think they were just soulmates. But there was that attitude from that earlier period in Churchill's beliefs that there's nothing wrong with homosexuality. His best friend is gay. Fantastic. Like clearly knows a lot of gay people. No one cared. But one of the things that one of the things that came out as I was reading this is that the thing that Louis XIV had kind of particularly slung into Eugene of Savoy's face was that he had hung out at the salons of a particular person in the French court, Francoise-Timoleon de Choisy. So I went and looked that person up, and oh my God, here she is. So Francoise, or Francine as she was known for so much of her life, de Choisy, was essentially a transgender woman, living fully as a transgender woman in the middle of Louis XIV's court, all through the latter half of the 17th century, and well through into the early 18th century. So, de Choisy was born in 1645. So think, that's English Civil War time. Cavaliers and Roundheads, lobster tail helmets, swords waving, etc. Born then, which was also a time when Louis XIV was coming into their kingship. They'd been a child king. De Choisy's mother was not so much a mistress of the king as an older woman who had tutored him in the arts of love. This is an older woman that had shagged the King of France all through his teenagerhood, basically teaching him, 1,001 ways to please a woman, basically. She was his lectern d'amoresse, his teacher of the amorous arts. It's good to be the king, apparently. She had 3 sons, and she conceived for some reason of this strange thing where she decided to dress her youngest son, Francois, as a girl, which was actually very, very common. But it was because she said she saw the female inclinations in her youngest son, so she just dressed that son in that way. Partly to please him, partly as a weird way of making herself look younger by having this sort of child dressed as a woman around her at all times, and also to please Monsieur. Now, Louis XIV's brother, the Duc d'Orléans, was very, very, very much a cross-dresser. If you see the TV series Versailles, which I highly recommend, you will see some beautiful scenes on this. The Duc d'Orléans, Louis XIV's brother, was a brilliant soldier, and in fact became a father of many of the dynasties of Europe, but in his heart wanted to be a woman. But just because of his position was not allowed to be, but cross-dressed very frequently, stayed a lot of the time away from Versailles itself and lived in Paris, going to Paris society and the Paris operas and so on, dressed as a woman, and struck up a friendship with de Choisy, who was roundabout of an age. They would cross-dress together at the court. De Choisy, their mother died, and Choisy continued to dress as a woman. At age 18, they decided that they were going to embrace living as a woman full time. And when asked about it, now Choisy was very articulate and was an incredible academician in later life, wrote a number of scientific and philosophical treatises which are preserved, they're famous. But de Choisy said, because the inclination in my heart was to live a female life, I longed to be loved as a woman, and I longed to be admired the way only a beautiful woman can be, and I wished the freedom in my soul that would only come from embracing not just the dress of a woman, but the life and the intention itself. That, my friends, is a trans woman. Now, you'll find a lot of 19th century write-ups on this person, by the way, because of the academic work. That couldn't be ignored. You'll find 19th century write-ups on this, and they will, we have to move past the shameful aspects of this character because, clearly they were, ladies and gentlemen, this was one hell of a transgender bottom. They say, the villainy, as they were like, not just dressing as a woman, but taking on the woman's part, even in the bourgeois. Yes, my friends, welcome to the world. Their life as a woman was not without its troubles. The gentleman that looked after the heir to the throne, the Dauphin of France, tried giving a public put down to de Choisy while at the opera one day and just saying, essentially, Madame or Monsieur, for I know not which I should address you as. While it must be admitted that you are very beautiful, I wonder at why you continue this life. Said this in public and was immediately cut down by the 11-year-old Dauphin himself, who went up to Choisy and looked up at them and said, Madame, you are as beautiful as an angel. And de Choisy remembered this and wrote this down. It's like this made it worth going on, because this was how they felt, and they'd just been affirmed. They were apparently incredibly beautiful, just stunning to behold. And de Choisy said when his mother died, there was some money, not a lot. She'd been extravagant in her lifestyle and had spent it all, but there were some gems and jewels which had been obviously gifts from the king, and they said what they valued most from this was these amazing gems and jewels in which they could dress themselves. De Choisy was renowned for their magnificent toilette, which means the magnificence of the way they did their hair, of their hair pieces, of their jewellery, of their choice of colours and fashion. Fellow spirit there. They were famous. Now, they held actually a salon. They actually had a place and a social gathering that people would meet. The Duc d'Orléans was obviously a frequent visitor there, and so was Eugene de Savoy. May not have been cross-dressing, but was hanging out with this entire cross-dressing element at the court. There were so many gay men living open gay lives at that court that it was renowned for it. People were... the Duc d'Orléans had to marry for reasons of state, because they had to have a spare heir in case Louis and the Dauphin should accidentally fall over and drop dead, and so had to marry a princess from the Rhineland, from the Palatinate actually, Lieselotte, and She is a diarist whose material has survived. She is now. If you see again, if you watch the TV series Versailles, Lieselotte is a wonderful character in that. She's superb. The actual Lieselotte was a bit of a twant. She was obviously very sour about her husband's lifestyle, the fact that their marital relations were seen entirely as duty, and the Duc d'Orléans had a gay lover for most of his life that he was passionately devoted to. That gay relationship is done beautifully in the Versailles TV series. But she is scathing about de Choisy, saying that this person swanned about looking so magnificent, so beautiful, and that this gay culture at court was just so blatant that so many men did not even hide their affairs. They did them in the open, and to the scandal of herself, who was from a very kind of right-wing Protestant, but later Catholic upbringing, etc. So it was a gay hotbed at that court, which is why I wanted to look into John Churchill, because John Churchill came from Charles II's court, which, as I said, tried to echo Louis's court as much as possible. I think John Churchill was not gay or bi, but had no problem with it, because had known and grown up around so many people who had gay lifestyles and were entirely wonderful people, that it just wasn't a factor. And that might have been something that really pleased Savoy as well. He's someone that doesn't care about my sexuality, they just care about me as a person. So I think that's where the friendship came from. But anyway, de Choisy lived this amazing life. Now, unfortunately, money was tight and eventually really ran out. De Choisy then went to Italy on someone's advice and unfortunately took to gambling and ended up in debt, and was caught at a low period in their life by religious voices who tried to convince them that their lifestyle as a woman was wrong. So this poor darling was just tortured by this, because they got very ill and managed to survive it, but it was thought that this was sort of through all these avid people praying for them. And so they managed to pour this poison in this poor girl's ears about how their lifestyle was wrong. For the rest of her life, she didn't tend to live completely openly as a woman, but did it behind closed doors and tried to live in public life as a male. But it tortured her. She just writes about this, how, she just feels that this half of her has to be hidden now. So this is, again, social pressure forcing detransitioning. Again, my heart bleeds for it, because her writings earlier just shown she was happy. But she was welcomed into the Science Academy and wrote some very important works. When this was, by the way, she'd gone to the age of 41 living full-time as a woman. This is 41 that she sort of does a partial public transition, though still dressing privately as female. So fairly impressive. 1685, she goes on a diplomatic mission to Siam, of all places, and is pushed really hard to get on this, because it's fascinated by the wildlife, by the culture, and by the opportunity to learn the language. And so, yeah, went on a 5-year mission to Siam, lived there amongst the Siamese court, wrote volubly about Thailand at the time, and has left diaries of this, wrote a book about their experiences, and came back. At this point, she writes in her memoirs that she felt sadness because she wanted to go back to living full-time as a woman, but felt that now, kind of getting into her 50s and so on, that she wouldn't be just the gorgeous, drop-dead beautiful thing that she was, and so might not see as much acceptance, particularly with the court turning more right-wing. So she's obviously still tortured about this. She took orders in the church. She had always been she'd been given a couple of abbeys and made like an abbe, like as a child. Yeah, it's just congratulations, you're an abbey. Ding! But I'm 9, mother, doesn't matter. And was kind of forced to live on the little income that this produced, but became an incredible academician, writing many books, and lived to a ripe old age. Lived to what, 81? In those last years of her life, wrote memoirs, and where I said she was regretting the fact that she felt now that if she went back to living publicly as a woman, that yeah, she didn't have the looks to carry it, and she felt that perhaps a lot of the tolerance had been that she was so beautiful in her youth, and that as an older woman she might not find the acceptance. But continued in private life, and by private life I just mean not going out into major public affairs. So this woman is still wandering around beautifully dressed as a woman as they write their books, as they wander about their house, as they wander about their home village, as they visit people. Just the days of going to the opera or visiting the court as a woman were gone. So I find their story very interesting. I find it very exciting how publicly they lived and how they clearly gathered a salon, a group of like-minded people, a social group of fellow transgender people at the court of Louis XIV. And this lasted for 20-odd years of very public life. And that this transgender person went on to become such an academic success. I find it very sad that they were preyed upon by a religious community who found them at a low point and tortured them and destroyed their happiness. I don't think from reading her memoirs that she was ever happy when she was having to present as male. You see the regret in there. It's sad, but a warning to us all. These forces are out there and we have to fight them. But I celebrate her as a trans woman that absolutely floored the entire French nation with her beauty, with her fashion sense, was completely accepted even by like the heir to the throne. She did leave an amazing legacy of intellectual publications, and also left something of a legacy at court, because these gay fraternities, societies, managed to survive through into the next reign, Louis XV. So all through that mid 18th century, I've seen no evidence that a transgender or cross-dressing social group survived, but the seeds and memories of it did, and we're finding them again now. There are other people in that group who may have left their mark, and we have to dig. De Choisy's memoirs have a lot of social gossip from the time in them, but they burned a lot of letters and they burned entire chapters that they wrote which was about that transgender society, because they didn't want these people to have aspersions cast on them in later life. So unfortunately, she herself had a hand in destroying transgender histories. It's important that we find these histories and bring them to light. I regret that she felt she had to hide these things. I don't think we'll ever find them, but her existence shines a light onto the fact that transgender people were there, were incredibly visible, at the very heart of power and not hiding it. The brother of the king of the largest, most powerful nation in Europe regularly cross-dressed in public and very much wished to live as a woman but could not due to their position. This woman, slightly down further on the ladder, was able to live her life publicly, fully as a woman in every possible way that she could, and was accepted for that to a very great degree. We have always been here. Something about humanity means that transgender identities keep on appearing. Were you to somehow magically remove us today, the way the right wing wants to do, we will keep appearing because we are part of the human journey. We are an exciting part of the human journey. Our voices have changed science and music and film and art. Our community has always been here, and it always will. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to find out more about de Choisy, check out the Wikipedia articles and so on are brief, but there are some little side links down there that lead to her actual publications, and many of those, of course, are in French. My ability to read 18th century French is relatively limited, but I can puzzle my way through. But there are English translations. As I said, a lot of these English translations were done in the 19th century and early 20th century. They spent a lot of time tutting about the fact that this woman is not only dressed as a woman, but is obviously very much a transgender bottom, which their minds just can't quite get around. But I'm glad to see her works are still out there. Anyway, much love from myself and from my ever kind and wise friend here. Look after yourselves. It's dangerous times out there. Make sure your personal safety is covered. But never, never, never lose your joy in life. Find the moments of beauty all around you and enjoy them. All right, much love to everyone. Bye. You gonna push it? He's gonna push it.